This is the Beyond Barriers Unscripted podcast.
It's not just the content, it's the approach and delivery.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Randy Owen. And in this episode, we continue our conversation with the folks over at Talk Description to Me. We talk about the realities of podcasting. JJ and Christine also share a little insight of when it's appropriate to share emotion in your description and in your content. Before we get to that, I'd like to ask that if you enjoy the show, to please hit the like button, consider subscribing and sharing with a friend or a family member. If you have any ideas for the show, questions or comments, or you just want to say hi, my name is Randy Owen, and you can email me at bb.unscripted@gmail.com. And now we're going to pick up our conversation with JJ and Christine talking about the importance of emotion in description. In my opinion, that's where we're all doing this. That's why you have art, to share those emotions and invoke that. And there's just something about feelings. It's just kind of a connection at a deeper level than just the facts.
Well, interesting. I facilitated an event a couple of weeks ago on the question. It was a mostly blind audience group of people. And I said, so the question was, descriptions of visual art, are they relevant or do they leave you unmoved? And so it was a really interesting discussion. But one of the few concrete takeaways was that most people said, I'm slightly less interested in the niggly details of a piece than I am in how it makes someone feel or what the overall impression is. And so it's kind of goes back to talking about the value of describing art, and the details are valuable and you want those to be available. But in a lot of circumstances, what the description user needs to know also is the context. Like, as a sighted person, when you looked at that, what did it evoke? What feelings or what emotions or what impressions? Did it make you feel sick because it's this weird nauseated abstract art piece? Does it make you queasy? Was it soothing to look at? And so the almost consensus from a group of 15 or so members of the blind community was, yeah, the details are important, but really art is less about detail and more about emotional response. And so we had a fun time sort of batting that around. Like, one describer shouldn't be responsible for that, but what if you say crowdsourced it? So in a museum, you would let anyone who wanted, any sighted viewer has 2 sentences to say what that art piece did for them, and then you'd end up with however many reactions just from art viewers that you could peruse as a blind person in an art gallery. So we batted it around for a while, but it definitely speaks to your point that the piece is less about the details than it is about what it evokes.
How many listeners do you guys currently have? Do you know?
Oh, we don't have final numbers, and frankly, they're moving around all the time. We have had a pretty good pickup in the U.S. and in the U.K. and in Australia. One of my favorite things is looking at our podcast downloads for where they are.
That's so fun. It's amazing.
I like. I think we've got listeners. We've been downloaded in over 50 countries at this point. And, a dozen of them are 1 or 2 downloads in, Uzbekistan or something like that. And that's probably a VPN or something that is just, picking up a signal from a different country or something. But if it's 5 or 6 people in Thailand that are listening, hey, that's pretty fantastic. And we had a listener in Germany recently who jumped on the bandwagon and was really excited, and we had some great conversations on Twitter. And there are folks all around the world who are tuning into this, and I love that. I mean, that's just I've been describing a long time, and I've got projects from movies to pieces of art that are in museums or broadcast, And I don't think that any of those projects had the reach, the international reach, and certainly the meaningful reach that this podcast has had. The conversations we have with people on Twitter and in emails, the people who want to reach out and say, this has, I understand something now that I didn't understand before, and I will understand it forever now. Like, I have a new understanding and appreciation of this thing that existed in my world that I didn't care about before, and now I can. And those kinds of connections, that kind of reach has been kind of mind-boggling and really wonderful.
I never thought about that.
I don't know our exact numbers, but I appreciate every single listener and every person who has written us to say that an episode's meant something to them.
I never thought about that as an audio describer, that you do your work, you send it off, and it's gone into the void. Whereas this is, you're getting direct, immediate feedback all the time. I don't think I'd actually considered how profoundly satisfying that must be for you professionally.
It really, when I first started describing for movies and TV, there wasn't really even a social media landscape. So I would literally submit a script, it would go to air, and I would have no idea if anyone had heard it, if it even, it just, nothing. And then when I started doing the live tours, I was like, oh, I just, and you've been on a few of those, Chris, where, we do a live tour and afterwards we go to the pub and I'm like, this is fantastic. I'm talking to 15 people that I've just, that I just described with, and I'm getting their feedback. They're teaching me about what I'm missing, and I'm learning, and we're connecting. And those conversations with 15 people were fantastic. And now we have this opportunity with this podcast to be reaching people around the globe and having conversations with folks who are tuning in Australia and saying, loved that you covered this, it changed my understanding, can you describe this? And oh my God, so now I'm having these conversations that are being with people who are wanting to connect with Christine and me and the idea. I mean, it's so profoundly satisfying. I've said it before, but this is often the bright spot of my work week is working on talk description to me. And if I'm having a rough work week and I'm like, I got a project that I'm slogging through, I'll probably end up putting in an extra hour or two of research on talk description to me, just as a way of avoiding the less pleasant work that I've got to do.
But there's definitely value in having passion about what you do, and I think when you have that passion, it just raises the quality of your content so much.
And JJ is a born storyteller too, and you can totally hear that in your description. I don't want to talk about like you're not here, JJ, but I always feel it's funny because I happened to hear a promo clip for something else that you and I did together, and you sound full on like you're totally there, and I sound kind of bored. I was like, oh yeah, see, JJ's got the theater school storyteller thing going, and I'm just like a conversation facilitator. And I went, man, I need to ramp up my game just a little bit, because I think JJ does that better than I do.
That is very kind of you to say. I think it is in no small part because in most of my description work, like if I was going to describe this image that we just talked about from Yosemite, if I was going to describe that in a museum setting, I would really have to tone down the conversation. I would really have to tone down opinion and excitement. You can't have all that. It doesn't work in a museum setting. And so to be able to discuss this in a podcast where, as you know, Randy, podcasts, we've got to be compelling, and we're encouraged to have our our storytelling selves out there and to emote and to be allowed to do that as a describer who has been trained to be neutral. Oy, it's like like, really, you want to open that
the lid's off?
All right.
The lid's off. We're just waiting for JJ's dream. I've got the chance to do many of my own dream episodes because I'm such a space geek, but we're still waiting for Roller Derby Live to come back so that JJ can do his dream episode. That's his dream episode.
Oh yeah,
I didn't even know what Roller Derby was.
Roller Derby opens up again?
Yeah, when's that going to be?
Oh. Oh,
Yeah, I can't wait
As
to
soon
now.
as it's open, Chris, we're going. We are describing every crunch and every costume, and it'll be fantastic.
We should do a live event for that. That
Yeah.
would be fun.
Oh my God.
You see, so
Yeah.
excited.
Oh, I'm in.
What is something since you both started doing this podcast, what's something you've learned about yourself?
Ooh,
That's a really good question.
that's a great question. I'm trying to come up with some small talk while I secretly ponder
Yeah,
that
I
in the
know.
privacy of my mind. It's helped. No, okay. I think it has helped me focus on what a curious person I am. So curiosity is kind of at the core of a lot of the programs that I do and the freelance stuff that I do. And I think working on this podcast with JJ has helped me to recognize that and distill out that that's a really key part of myself and a very relevant part of my professional life is the curiosity that I bring to things. So I'm always wanting to know more and always asking questions and sort of processing things as I hear them and trying to synthesize a sense of the world from them. So when we record, we don't have a script. Like, we have ideas of what we're going to talk about for sure, but I don't know what JJ's going to say. So as he's speaking, I'm doing, super processing in my head and coming up with the parts. Okay, which parts are gray areas for me? What don't I know? And so that's one thing for sure that I've learned about myself. It's helped me distill the fact that curiosity is a big part of who I am.
Yeah. Similarly, I guess I have learned about where I'm at in this work and some of and the way I want to be moving forward with description. I hadn't realized, I've been doing this 20 years and I really truly enjoy, and I've always said that one of the best parts about this job is, as a describer, someone brings you a project and that's what you dive into for a week. So I'm doing action movies this week, and so that's the world I'm in. And then the next week I'm doing a description of a ballet, so that's the world I'm in. And then the next week I'm doing a ghost walk, and so that's the world I'm in. And I've always liked that. But what this project, what this podcast has really shown me is that it's not just the content, it's the approach and delivery that is I'm quite fascinated by. And I think audio description is at a place in its history because it's been around long enough now, and description users have been using audio description long enough now, and the describers have been around long enough now that we can have a new set of conversations and we can take it to new places. We can use use what we already know, use the approach that's been established and kind of codified, and we can take that approach and apply it to different things. And I hadn't realized how much I personally was craving that in my work life. And so this podcast has shown me how much of that I desire. And luckily, because we have some listeners now that are in different places and in different fields, Christine and I are getting calls to say, hey, you guys deal with describing quirky things in quirky ways. I've got a project that does this. Would you be interested in helping with that? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll try that. And so this is, we get to learn about ourselves, about where we are in the broader description community, and it's also provided a bit of opportunity to explore, because it's acted as a way, as an introduction to other people who have their own projects that maybe we can contribute just a little bit to.
Has anybody thrown the idea at you, or somebody's probably already approached you about this, but you both speak English and it's recorded in English. Has there been any requests or demands for other languages or translation?
We did have someone ask about French, were they in Montreal? I think they were in Quebec. And they said, wouldn't it be great if this was available in French? And unfortunately, I'm not bilingual. And we just kind of said, that would be amazing. Like, we'd love to help you if you're, if you need help or whatever, or give some guidance on our experience. If you're thinking about doing it, fire away. And I think that would be amazing if someone was doing this in English and Spanish and German. And I think this should be available to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, translating it would be one idea, and certainly valuable. I would think, translating into other languages, but also having different people approach these topics from different points of view in different countries. Like with all description, this is a point of view, especially with this kind of description that is a little bit off of neutral. We are bringing our own experiences to these descriptions and these questions. So someone in another country it is not just going to bring, it's not just about the language that needs to be translated. It's the point of view that needs to be translated as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've thought of that too. I thought, what if other people did what we're doing? I would think that'd be awesome because of that very thing. And I remember when we first started, one of the Facebook groups that we post on sometimes, he used a bunch of political language that frankly I can't remember and didn't even understand because I'm not a super political person. But he said, I'm really glad that your program is insert political word, because I was afraid it was going to be insert other political word. And I was kind of scratching my head thinking, well, what else would we have done? But then I thought, well, the world's full of people. We could have tackled it in any way. And I've often thought about that remark and thought, yeah, other people could take this idea on and do something completely different with it. And I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, and it is something that when we approach a topic, we try to have some humility, and we try and express to our listeners that we're not describing the truth here. We're not describing, here's an image, here's exactly how it looks, and now you understand and need not think about it. Here's our take on this, and here's how we interpret these visuals and the context of these visuals. And sometimes that's fun and playful and doesn't really matter. Like if you're describing TikTok videos or something like that, then your personal take on it's just kind of fun. But when there was the chaos in the Capitol building, and we didn't know what was happening. We were describing that within 12 hours. We didn't know exactly what was happening. And that was a moment where we were needed to express, like, listen, we are going to do the best we can on this, but we don't have all the answers. So let's not pretend that we have all the context here. Let's not pretend that that what we're telling you is the whole truth on this. We're going to do our very best to be to be a version of neutral in this moment. But other people looking at this same footage with a little bit of different information, they're going to describe this differently. So be advised. And so we try to put that stuff out there to make sure that that's understood.
And we definitely take suggestions from listeners all the time. But the truth is we choose what we cover. It's not like we're working for a big network who says, okay, today you're covering this. We each have, JJ and I have worldviews, which are, relatively overlapping, which is great. But so it means that we choose to cover things that we think are important or interesting or description worthy. And someone else would make totally different choices about that.
I really respected when you guys started covering the events of January 6th. One of the first things you said was, we are Canadians. You identified that, and I thought that was really respectful. And I really, really loved the way you guys approached it. It was kind of scary with what was going on.
Very scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have American friends, of course. I'm sure JJ does too. And how can we not empathize with what it would be like if that was our home? And I think that's a quality JJ and I share is empathy. It's easy for us to to imagine or evoke how something feels to other people. So we always try to approach our topics with, humility and but in that case, like we have a lot of American listeners. JJ and I personally have American friends, and of course that was a terrible day. And yeah, it felt very important to say, like, we get this is awful, and as outside, this is not our country, so we don't want to. The last thing we want is to come across as frivolous or, oh, look at this crazy thing happening.
Rubbernecking.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted to recognize that this was hugely emotionally impactful for everybody, but especially if that's your country.
You guys have covered a variety of topics, and I commend you because some of the topics you guys have talked about are they're tough. You guys talked about the George Floyd video. You tackled the issue with Aunt Jemima and the imagery behind that and the history. You did something, my favorite one's probably the Mars landing. You talk about as you're coming down and these circles come into view and those are craters, and then you start talking about the delta. I get chills when I hear it.
Me too.
But I also got chills when I heard you talking about George Floyd.
I know. Different.
Was that hard?
Oh my God. JJ, you should, yeah.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. And we talked a lot. I mean, that was our very first episode was the George Floyd video. And I mean, I still kind of shake my head. I don't know. I'm glad we were naive enough to think that was a good idea. Because I think ultimately it was saying that we are covering this. We are going to talk about the tough things. We are going to describe the important images, and a lot of the important images right now, and certainly then, were challenging. And but I mean, that's kind of the point of this show is to describe the images that are important across society. That it's making sure that everyone can participate in conversations that involve important images and visuals. And what's at that moment in time, in not only in the US but all across the world, that image was one of the most important visuals that existed, and people were left out of the conversation because they didn't have access to it. And so we did our best to kind of go at that head on, and it was tough. I mean, we had to take several breaks and walk around, shake it off, and come back to it a few times. And I mean, almost as tough as recording it was putting it out into the world and waiting to hear if we had hit the mark or missed the mark, because you don't want to miss in a moment like that. And thankfully, we haven't. The feedback we've gotten, I think, it has let us know that it was appreciated. And some people said, "Hey, thank you for doing it. Did not listen, but thank you for doing it." And I have absolute respect for that. Like, that's fine. That is absolutely fine. But we have received many notes from people saying that they appreciated that it was now available.
And it changed. I think episodes like that change the landscape for visually impaired people in a particular way, which is that there's been a lot of things we've covered, that one specifically, where in the past I would avoid knowing too much about that issue, partly because I would say to myself, well, I can't look at the image, and so I'm kind of barred from part of it anyway, so I'll just sort of turn aside from more of it. And now there's a choice. Sighted people have the choice to look at the image or to look away. And now for some of those things, blind and partially sighted people have that choice too. Okay, that's actually available. I can still choose not to listen to it, and that's perfectly, a choice that I might make if I wasn't doing this podcast and it just came across my newsfeed. I would think hard about, am I going to listen to that? And it changes the choice landscape around news. But yeah, some of that stuff's been really hard. And I don't have a journalism background at all. And we've sort of found ourselves doing sort of journalism. And so there's been times where the material we're covering is so overwhelming that I just kind of lose my composure, and I need a minute, and we go, okay, do we re-record that, or do we leave it in? Like, how much emotion is it professional to point at, to have? And so I figure we're not on CBC or CNN, so we're just ourselves, and that kind of informs what level of emotional reactions we show. And sometimes emotion is the right reaction, so the editing choices around that stuff have been interesting too, where do we leave in the obvious moments where we're both like catching our breath? And I think there's value in that, because we're not hardcore journalists getting a story into 2-minute slot. We're people talking about tough issues.